So if I have done the things right, recording have started. Right, so Dean, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ariel. Great. I think you have some slides you're going to put up. And as Ariel's putting up the slides, just great to see everybody that has joined us this morning. And thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, because I know we're calling from all around the world. I'm calling from the west coast of the United States, so bright and early here. And apologies, since I'm sitting outside, there might be some dogs and things barking in the distance, but just great to be here with everybody today. And just to start off, to say a word we often say here at INEE is how excited we are, and we are definitely excited to be sharing with all of you today an update on INEE's minimum standards. And as you know, the minimum standards are really, the network's foundational tool. They're the pinnacle example of INEE members' collective impact. They were first published in 2004. They were revised in 2010, and they really represent the collaboration and consensus of thousands of education and emergencies professionals, including affected populations from around the world. And they provide concrete guidance and best practice to provide safe, relevant, and quality education for all. Given their critical and foundational importance for our sector of education emergencies, maintaining them is really essential for all of us, practitioners, advocates, and policymakers. And they have to include the emerging and evolving issues and thematic areas in our sector, in humanitarian assistance. As mentioned, they were published in 2004, revised in 2010, and there have been significant shifts in the landscape and global context since then. It's imperative that the minimum standards reflect the critical pieces of the humanitarian system, including the global education cluster, the sustainable development goals, the global compact on refugees, education cannot wait, etc. The humanitarian development community has also had to adapt rapidly to changes in the global context, like the escalating impact of climate-induced disaster, health emergencies like we're facing now with COVID, and a rapid increase in both the number and complexity of humanitarian crises worldwide. Additionally, they should reflect new evidence and further linkages to key emerging issues such as child protection, gender, migration, resilience, among others. Likewise, since the World Humanitarian Summit, momentum is gathering for new ways of working, efforts to localize and also enhance the synergies that call for coherence and humanitarian development response. The education emergency sector has had to regularly learn, grow, and evolve, and it is really necessary to review and update the INEE minimum standards to meet the needs and priorities of INEE's members and all humanitarian actors in our evolving international humanitarian context. Can we go to the next slide, please? So just to talk a bit about the scope of the update, what we see this scope including is first the review and assessment of the uptake and usage of the INEE minimum standards. We also see, building into this process, seeking a wide range of feedback from INEE members, other education emergency and humanitarian stakeholders, and importantly, members of populations affected by crisis, to bring the INEE minimum standards further into the evolving humanitarian context. And we want to make sure that they're reflecting this new learning and the priorities of all of our INEE members and the community at large. We also see this process including components of ways to encourage and facilitate wider uptake and usage. And this update will also be an opportunity to build in improved user friendliness. I know all of you that are working with the standards always have ideas on how we can make them easier and accessible in terms of how we use them in our implementation. And we're going to be doing this by reflecting human-centered design principles. We don't see that this update would fundamentally alter the core structure of the domains and standards. And that's based on consultation with you as INEE members, because what we've heard back repeatedly is that the core structure continues to stay structurally strong. We can go to the next slide, Ariel, and then I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Dean. We are now going to talk about the vision and approach that we are going to use in the throughout the whole process of the INEE Minimum Standards update. In the slides, you can see that we are going to have a human rights approach that is in our vision is compatible with cultural diversity and multiculturalism. If you see the wheel that is in this slide, you will become familiar, and I hope that you acknowledge with me that is similar to the INEE wheel for the fundamental standards that are community participation, coordination, and analysis. But in the center and in the core of the INEE minimum standards that we are going to, foundational standards that we are going to be coherent with during the whole process, we have an age, gender, and diversity lens. We have cultural and linguistical approach. This means that we are going to take into consideration the different language and cultures of the different crisis contexts when the minimum standards are used and applied for different practitioners and stakeholders. And we are going to have a very wide field participation from the different countries where practitioners are use and take forward the minimum standards. This is the core of the participatory methodology that we are going to try to implement during the assessment, consultation, and update process. If we go to one of the foundational standards of community participation, we need to take into account that we will make the overall INEE community participating throughout the process. We also will take into account different coordination mechanisms like cluster coordination mechanisms, UNHCR, UNRWA, IOM, and all the different kind of education and emergency and triple nexus way of strengthening and empower the coordination of activities in the field of education. We're also going to target volunteer and representative from affected communities. So to be coherent again with the fundamental domain of INEE of community participation, and we will incorporate their voice in the scope and content of the update. And also we are going to take into account the different ways and variety of access to connectivity and the ways that the people will be able to participate in the different stages of the assessment and the consultation and the update process. That means that we are not going to use online platform, we are going to use webinars, we are going to use offline means, and also we are going to use the traditional ways of meetings, workshops, and consultation directly with the people involved in this process. The other fundamental domain of INEE that we are going to be coherent with is the analysis. We are going to start this process with a minimum standards usage and uptake assessment that we will explain in the next slide. We are going to have a thorough consultation process that will be participatory from an equity perspective, and we're going to collate, analyze, and revise all the minimum standards text in line and in according with the consultations and the priorities made by the people who will participate throughout the whole process and the community and the whole INEE community. And finally, the other foundational standard for INEE is the coordination foundational standard that is we are going to establish this coordination with the whole network of INEE and the practitioners and dedicated staff that participate and the main users of the minimum standards in all the different phases of the education and emergency recovery and development that where the standards are being used. So aside that, we are going to go to the next slide where we are going to have a timeline and key actions for the different processes that I already updated. In this column, you will see the task, and the first Gantt chart is about the assessment and consultation. This webinar is the launch and the presentation of the process, and the next step is to recruit a vendor, a consultant that will do an usage and uptake of how the different stakeholders are taking into account the minimum standards in the whole work. This request for proposal has been already published in the INEE website, and we are receiving and we hope to receive more proposals for the different consultants and vendors and people who would like to be the main responsible of implementing this assessment that is going to take place. Well, the next step, of course, is going to conduct the minimum assessment that we hope to take place August, September, October. We are also to hire a project lead for the whole process that will work hand in hand with the INEE Secretariat, and I will take some technical responsibilities in the process. We also going to do a plan for the consultations that, as I explained, is going to have a digital platform where people will going to be able to collate and produce their inputs both online and offline. We are also going to produce and implement all the different ways of offline consultations to the different kind of technological ways that we have to do offline, and we're also going to have these more traditional ways of consulting people, that is through workshops and face-to-face consultations. And the final step that is going to happen in the 4 months from October, November, December of this 2021 and January, February for 2022, to conduct the virtual consultations in that. On this blue box, you can see some of the also ideas and approaches that are linked to the center of the wheel that I explained in the previous slide. The assessment and consultation will take into consideration local languages and context, meaning that they are not going to be implemented and take only on the 5 INEE languages, but we are going to take also into consideration the language of the conflict countries, like or the different countries like Pashto and Dari in Afghanistan, like Burmese and Karen in Myanmar, like Creole in Haiti, and all the different examples that you may like and would like to suggest they need to undertake that consultation and assessment process. So we are also going to have an age, gender, and diversity lens, so to make the process as inclusive as possible with the limitations that we may have on this. On the issue of the gender, we already have on board a gender consultant that is going to take and is going to assess the gender and diversity focus of the current handbook and standards. We're also going to intend to establish an equity sampling and representation methodology, so all the different opinions, all the different stakeholders are taken into consideration. And we don't have any bias on the analysis, on the assessment and the consultation, and any of the different stakeholders will take preeminence and establish a dominant opinion on how the minimum standards, content and format are going to be updated. This issue of equity sampling and participation is very linked with the INEE agenda of localization and decolonization, where the promotion of the age, gender and diversity and the participation of different stakeholders throughout the different levels are very much encouraged and is a fundamental part, so the process is legitimized and legitimate for all the people who is participating on the update process of the minimum standards. So in this we are going, so from July this month on 2021 to February 2022, we are going to do this process of the assessment on the consultation that will determine the scope of the update of the minimum standards. In the next slide, I'm presenting the task that is going to happen in 2022. That is going to be, we're going to identify chapter authors or focal points that are going to be the ones who are going to be the responsible of doing the actual writing and update of the different chapters of the INEE Minimum Standards Handbook. That is going to happen, this identification. We are also going to try to implement this equity approach on the selection and identification of the chapter and focal points authors. And of course, there we're going to collate, analyze, and draft and revise the text of the minimum standards according to the scope identified during the consultation process. After the writing process, we are going to have a process of validation and review that is linked to the fundamental standards of INEE of coordination and community participation. We are going to validate the process and review with the reference group, with peer groups, with the INEE secretariat, with the INEE members, with the INEE wider community as well. The final stages will be the copy, edit, and translate and design, because we would like to emphasize that the final product will be in, and the whole process will also be taking place in the 5 INEE languages, also to have this equity approach that we are talking about. Of course, the review and identification will take the whole part of May, June, July, and August, and I hope that 4 months are going to be enough for this process of writing and revision of the different chapters. We hope to have a soft launch on August, September, according to if everything's go according to our scope of work. An official launch and dissemination that with all the final products, hopefully October, November, or December of 2022. Before finalizing these 2 slides, I would like to emphasize that, as you all understand, this is just a timeline that, of course, may change with the different context, challenges, and different workload that we have throughout the whole process of the update of the minimum standards process, and the participation of the different communities and the different stakeholders in this equity approach that I would like to emphasize once again that we would like to have on this. And to finalize this slides and to pass to the next one, I also would like to say that we are going to take into account all the lessons learned, all the methodologies, all the institutional memories and memoirs that we have from the 2020 update. So all the work and all the people that have participated in that process will have their part, their says, and will be able to advise on the way and the best fashions. So this process will take place and be accurate and online with the different changes that we have during these times. So say that we are going also now to pass to I would like to introduce Ula, who is Community of Practice Coordinator, who will take us to the next slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ariel. So hi, everyone. I'm the coordinator of the new Community of Practice at INEE. So this is a new platform that we launched last month. And we think that this will be the place to go to for people who are interested in getting informed and in participating and contributing to the update. So the Community of Practice that we offer to all the members is based on a Slack platform. This is a platform that is very user-friendly and accessible on all type of devices, mobile and laptops. And we avail through it all the channels of conversations and communication with our members. So people can communicate text, and we can also launch polls and questionnaires to allow people to contribute in two-way conversations and have discussions related to the community or to the MS update. So I will not get into the details of the platform. If you are interested, and if this is the first time that you hear about the Community of Practice, I invite you to visit our website, where we have a couple of videos to introduce this platform to you. The purpose here is just to let you know that this will be one of the main channels of information and interaction related to the update. Can we go to the next slide, please? So the idea is that Slack is a channel-based platform. So we already created a new channel dedicated to the MS update. So anyone who is already part of the community of practice will be able to access and join this channel. And in this way, he will be ready or she will be ready to receive the updates about the process and provide and contribute with feedback and input and contribute and participate in discussions. So this is, I think, will be one of the main channels. Of course, we will have the other traditional INEE channels of information, but we hope that people will adhere to this community of practice to have the two-way conversation that we aim to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ula. Now we are going to go to the next slide and to the next panelist, that is Natalie Ackstein, who is the community member engagement coordinator. Natalie?
Thank you, Ariel, and I'm very happy to be in this webinar today with all of you. Basically, my presentation is just to emphasize that there are many other member engagement platforms, of course, but specifically, I'd like to highlight two of them, which will be used to leverage, will be used to support the INEE MS update consultation process at the field level. And these two platforms are the INEE meetups and the INEE Country Focal Points initiative. So I'll be going through that really quickly with you. Firstly, the INEE meetups. Many of you probably already familiar with this, this meetup structure, but basically they are meant to be open and informal meetings. Currently, they're being hosted on Zoom and fully virtual, meant to be where members and others can network, share experiences, and discuss relevant topics. Although these are structured to be informal meetings, any meetups focusing on the MS update will serve to introduce the topic of the MS update, get to know members' own experiences with the minimum standards, and also kick off any additional substantive and formal discussions among members through other INEE platforms. For example, through the previously mentioned INEE community of practice. So really, this is an informal space, but of course will allow members and others to convene meetings related to the MS update and to kick off these discussions, which will be really important for the membership. Secondly, I wanted to talk a bit about the INEE Country Focal Points initiative, or the INEE CFP, as we call it, initiative. Basically, it's a pilot project which started in February this year and was developed to support the building and nurturing of relationships between members in their country. And the CFPs, or the country focal points, are key reference persons at country level, meant to support this networking and communication, mainly by facilitating exchange among members. So of course, they have a really big role to play in the MS update consultation that will happen. I'd like to mention as well that currently the initiative is undergoing an evaluation process to determine the future shape and direction of the initiative. However, what I can affirm already is that they will be engaged, the country focal points, in leading consultations with members at the field level. Although I'll be able to share more information in due course once we finalize our evaluation and determine the next steps. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Now, in these slides, what we would like to emphasize that all the minimum standards support and work that is being undertaken and is on the way will not be stopped because we are doing the minimum standards update. We are going to continue and doing ongoing the use and application of the standards, like the INEE standard section on the website and case studies. We are going to continue using the current tools like the monitor and evaluation frameworks, the indicator frameworks, and the competency frameworks. The minimum standards trainings and e-courses are going to continue and going to be strengthened. Charlotte and Bente are doing a very good job, and they are currently developing a trainer of trainers, and all these capacity building efforts will continue to support the INEE community and practitioners, and also the help desk, that is also one of the new initiatives of engagement with the people at the field, will also continue. So this is also to say that meanwhile we are doing the update of the content and the format of the handbook, we are encouraged, and we will also continuing using the current minimum standards in the way that we are using, and always striving for equality usage and empowerment, the usage of the minimum standards for the practitioner and the delivery of quality education. So say that I think there is all this, I think there is only one slide more that I would like to present. That is the voices from the field. We always want to present and to emphasize the use of the minimum standards. The world cloud that you are watching now, looking now, has been done taking into account the feedback of more than 370 participants on the minimum standards trainings, where more than 170 organizations participated, emphasizing that not all of them were INEE members, but there were a lot of interest on participating on this training. So these are the key words that we are taking from the feedback from the people who participate in the capacity building trainings and the trainings on the minimum standards. And we would like to give in this message that the standards are still, as Dean said at the beginning, are still really relevant. Having a strategic plan in place, there can be used an advocacy tool. They can be a preparedness tool. It's a blueprint for harmonization, and it's a cross-cutting tool for global framework and coordination and practitioners on education and emergency. And this is again the voices from the people, for the more than 370 people who participated in the different trainings of the minimum standards. Say that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. This is the final stage of the presentation, and now we are open for the final part of the webinar, that is the questions and answers that all the participants may have about this upcoming process. Thank you very much. Asim or Kate can help me with the question that has been posted or something like that.
Yeah, so Ariel, we have one question from Leonardo. So maybe you can read it.
Oh, Ariel, you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. Yes, the question from Leandro Salazar is that given the current nature and format of the minimum standards, it's probable that the uptake and use assessment will focus primarily on the implementation experience by humanitarian actors. What will be done to ensure that the minimum standards can serve as a reference to a broader audience, for example, not only humanitarian actor, etc.? I'm shortening the questions, Leandro. Well, the answer to that is that we are trying to implement an equity sampling approach for the assessment of the usage. We are going to establish a methodology where the sample of the people who will be consulted will be broad enough to take into account not only INEE members, but also people who are not member of the INEE community, but also any other practitioners from a very wide range, from Ministry of Education, international NGOs, local NGOs, and also one part of the assessment will be a question and finding people who are not using the minimum standards, what are the challenges and deterrents about the issue of the uses of the minimum standards. I hope that with that brief answer, I satisfy your query. Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? I don't see any on the chat box.
Ariel, just to add to your answer there, I think another key aspect of this update will be when they're finalized, also thinking through how we develop capacity sharing, capacity building on the standards, really keeping this audience of teachers and other education personnel in mind, and also connecting very closely with INEE's Teachers in Crisis Contexts collaborative, where there is a real focus on teachers in schools. So there's going to be quite a bit of work that will take place sometime afterwards. But definitely teachers will be, and education personnel will be part of those groups that we'll be reaching out to for sure. And then Ariel, there's a question here. I see it in the chat. Let me scroll up to it. But from Mia Dietrich Ura, sorry, I think I missed something in the consultation approach and how we capture feedback from the users of the standards who are not members of INEE. So maybe you'd like to talk a bit, Ariel, about the partnership with HSP, the Humanitarian Standards Partnership.
Sure. Again, I will start the answer with the concept of the equity and human-centered design, where we would like to have a sample of people who are not only INEE members, how we're going to engage the people who are not INEE members or at currently. Well, that is going to be done through the consultation and assessment process. We are going to directly contact different NGOs, different local NGOs, and different stakeholders, and directly have a workshop and invite them for the consultation process. I don't have all the answers about the methodologies so far because we are in the planning stage of the consultation. So how this equity sample that involve everybody is going to be made at a global level, I cannot answer all the particular issues about that. But yes, we have in mind that we need to have a methodology to involve everybody who is to have an equity vision and engaging everybody as wider as possible. Thank you.
Ariel, as folks are formulating their questions, and again, you'll see in the chat, you're welcome to add questions. And one thing we talked about as a secretariat is this is actually part of that consultation. Your questions are really timely, and this is actually a chance for us to take your questions back and reflect on those as we're going through this assessment phase, as we're looking at the usage and uptake of the standards. So really helpful, and we're capturing all your questions in a document outside of Zoom so that we can be sure to feed those into this process.
On the question about that INEE has not a country focal point in East Africa, one of the methodologies of engagement that proven very successful in the 2010 update process was to have host organizations and country focal points, volunteers, organizations, and members who will take forward the consultations. Again, we are trying to do equity selection and for outreach of countries where we're going to try to engage host organizations and host focal points who will take forward the organizations, and this is not limited to the countries where INEE have country focal points. So any other questions I can see on the chat, please? And as Natalie reminds me, we have a country focal point in Kenya, that is a long-time member of, that is Luis, that is also member of INEE for a long time. Any other questions that we are missing so far in the chat?
No other questions at the moment, but invitation to everybody to keep posting their questions. You can post them in the chat box or in the Q&A.
Ariel,
So,
some folks were asking about this webinar, so definitely keep an eye on the INEE website so that you can share this with your colleagues. And after this meeting, that's why we're recording today, so that this will be posted. So do keep an eye on that. And Charlotte has also highlighted for everyone INEE's help desk. So if you have any questions on the use and application of the standards today, you are welcome. We want to see our members using the help desk, and you'll see a link in the chat box.
About this webinar, we are in the process of adding subtitles in the 5 INEE languages at the beginning, and upon request, we are going to expand the subtitles and translation of the presentation of this webinar to be shared with the wider community. And again, I encourage everybody to register on the community of practice of Slack, where we are going to have the main discussion channels and contribution for the minimum standards update.
Yeah, I confirm the channel is open and everyone is welcome to join it. Not much is happening yet, but yeah, you can already post your questions there, and I think Ariel will be happy to answer as much as he can.
Yeah, Ula, if you could just say a little bit more, how many INEE members have actually joined the community of practice today?
Yeah, up till now, let me check. It's around 900. I can give you the exact number.
Yeah.
Not less 850 that we don't.
Okay, that's great. No, and when you go to the community of practice, I know it might be a new platform for many of you, but it's quite a efficient way to really share information, to interact with other INEE members, to ask your questions, to share great news about the work you're doing. And there are channels for all types of topics in areas where you have specialization. And now we have channels dedicated to the update process with Ariel facilitating that channel. So it's a great opportunity, something that our members have been asking for many years on ways that we could engage like this. So we really want to encourage you to access it, but not only access it, engage and actively respond and share information.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. Absolutely. The purpose is to engage and to have two-way communications, not only getting information, but also give feedback and opinion and share opinion and experiences from the ground or from everywhere.
Excellent. I see somebody's asking for a link to the channel. Maybe we could put that in the chat.
Yeah, so the link to the channel is only useful when we are part of the community, but I can post it. It's not useful if we are not member yet.
And Ariel, there's another question here from a colleague who's asking, do you consider that there's a conflict between the minimum standards currently being for education rather than from education and emergencies? And saying that Benta had made this point that the focus was on education as a whole.
I will not answer this question, but this is the kind of question that we will answer during the consultation and update process. I mean, it's not because I don't want to answer the question, it's because this is exactly the scope of the questions that we need to answer for the scope of the update. It's not I who will need to answer this question, it's the result of the overall consultation and participatory process, either if this education an emergency, either if it's going to consider a still minimum, etc. This is a very good question to trigger the consultation and the debate process about the scope of that date. So, we still have some more minutes if anybody wants to make any other comments, not only questions and suggestions. And also we'll say that all the people who were participating in this webinar will, in the coming weeks, will receive a feedback questionnaire about the webinar and the process that we are going to start.
Just to add to what Ariel just said about the previous question, when the 2010 minimum standards were being revised, that debate first started. Should we still have education in emergencies in the title? And as you look at the standards today, it was decided to call them the INEE Minimum Standards for Education, and then Preparedness, Response, and Recovery. And I think it's exactly as Ariel said, it's really important to debate this issue and to discuss further how we link to education overall, also highlighting education emergencies and the need to give that the attention it deserves. So I'm just seeing who posted that question. Emil, I think that's a really helpful question. And as we were saying, the feedback today, the questions coming in is really part of the process. And we're capturing your comment there. So really thank you for raising that important point.
Maybe I should just comment a little bit about that, because this has been actually something we have been debating for quite a long time. And to me, working on education in emergency and education for many, many years, as many of us, we always try to say that education starts with education development, and everything you do in education in emergency should start with what is already in place, because then it's much easier to move into a preparedness, response, and a recovery transition of what you did in emergency. And then you can take with you everything you learned during the process, the response, the emergency situation, and bring that back again to the education development program ongoing in the context you are responding to. Just to have that in mind and think about that when you work on education and when you use the minimum standard. So as you see on the book, the minimum standard for education, and I think that is something that will be remaining during the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bente. And I would like to highlight that the handbook is always on Bente's desk, always. So on another issues that I would like also, we would like as INEE as a community to have a very honest and open debate is the issue about localization and decolonization. That is very important part of the INEE Secretariat initiatives. Not only, and this is a part of the process. That's why we always, and in this webinar you have here the equity and human-centered design process so much and so many repetitive times. We would like to be very aware of that, and we would like to have a bit different opinions on how that can be implemented and take forward, because it's very important. It's as important as the update of the content as the process of the content is legitimized by the overall community. That's another important message I would like to deliver. So I don't see any more questions. Gretchen, you have your hand up if you would like to type your question in the chat box, please, or later on send it by any of the channels. We will be able to provide a feedback on that. So given that we still have a couple of minutes, also if any of my colleagues and friends here from the secretariats will like to add something to close this session webinar, please feel free to do so. So I think that Dean, we can close here.
Definitely. We schedule an hour, but it's always great if we're efficient and we can finish a little bit early, because I know everybody here is very busy. But what I'd like to do is just end with a couple of comments. You saw earlier the slide that Ariel shared with of the world and comments about the value of the minimum standards to our members. And really, we have the privilege here at the INEE Secretariat to work with our members around the world to support them in their use and application of the standards. And so during these efforts with, Benta and Charlotte here on the call and other members of the Secretariat, we've been hearing back, why the standards are so important to all of our work and the role that they play. So those quotes that you saw came from those discussions with INEE members. And what we're hearing again and again is how timely this update process is. And we've worked hard to be where we are today. We have a number of donors who are supporting this work. That took some time to get everybody on board. And it's just really, really the right time. And just to say, we know that you feel, what we're hearing is that it is important that the standards reflect the realities that all of us face, that they have to be meaningful and relevant to all of the preparedness, response, and recovery work. We say here at INEE that we exist for and because of you, the membership. And ultimately, the standards are a tool developed and owned by all of us. So we're going to do all we can here on the Secretariat to ensure that the update process reflects that. So really, really want to encourage you again to get involved in the channels that we've shared today. Keep an eye on all the communications coming out about this work. And just want to thank all of you in advance for contributing to this really important effort for our sector, for our the professionalization of our field of practice, and really ultimately meeting the needs of our children, youth, young people who are, have that right to education and in emergencies in specific. So thank you, everyone. Really an honor to be launching this today, and looking forward to the feedback and your contributions. Take good care. And we will be in touch.
So thank you very much to everybody for participation. I will close the webinar now. Bye. Ciao.
Bye, everyone.